You know what drives me absolutely crazy? Watching people walk into a garden center, drop $500 on an electric greenhouse heater, and install it in a structure that's bleeding warmth like a sieve through single pane glass and zero thermal mass. It's like trying to heat your house by cranking the thermostat while leaving every window wide open and wondering why your electric bill looks like a car payment. I spend way too much time thinking about greenhouse thermal dynamics, passive solar design, and why most people seem determined to ignore every free heat source nature provides before buying equipment that costs them hundreds of dollars every single winter. If you're someone who actually wants to understand the proper sequence for heating a greenhouse, instead of just throwing money at the utility company, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up saving you from some expensive mistakes. Here's something that might shock you. According to recent energy audits, the average hobby greenhouse owner in cold climates spends between $800 and $1,200 annually just on heating costs. We're talking about 40 to 60 kilowatt hours per month during winter, which at current electricity rates translates to $400 to $600 every single winter just to keep your tomatoes from freezing. That's for a structure that's maybe 10 by 12 feet. Meanwhile, greenhouses built in the 1940s and 50s, structures your grandparents operated in the exact same climates, had heating bills of exactly $0. Zero. Not because energy was cheaper back then, though everyone loves to claim that. Energy was actually expensive relative to income. They just didn't need to buy any. Because they understood something we've completely forgotten. We've reversed the optimal order for greenhouse heating. Modern growers rush straight to the hardware store, buy a home 500-watt electric heater, plug it in, and then wonder why their winter utility bills look like a second mortgage payment. It's like asking whether you should buy a Ferrari when the transmission in your current car is completely broken and you haven't even checked the oil. Your grandparents didn't start with artificial heat. They built systems that captured, stored, and generated warmth using nothing but physics, biology, and materials they already had. Heat was the last thing they added, not the first. That simple reversal of priorities is costing modern greenhouse owners thousands of dollars over a decade while their plants barely survive instead of thriving. The truth is, there's an optimal order for heating your greenhouse that can literally save you $5,000 to $10,000 over 10 years and dramatically improve your growing conditions. But most people completely ignore this sequence because walking into a store and buying equipment feels like progress, while understanding thermodynamics feels like homework nobody assigned. They want to skip straight to the thermostat without doing the boring foundational work that actually matters. Today, I'm going to walk you through the exact order you should approach greenhouse heating, step by step, so you can maximize free heat sources while minimizing your dependence on expensive electricity. And I guarantee some of this is going to surprise you, especially the part about why compost bins aren't just for fertilizer and why your north wall is bleeding more money than you realize. But before we dive into the specific steps, let me tell you why getting this order wrong can be so devastating. Imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't start by shopping for fancy light fixtures and granite countertops if your foundation was cracked and your roof was leaking water onto the floors. Yet that's exactly what most greenhouse owners do with their heating strategy. They get excited about comparing BTU ratings on space heaters while their structure is hemorrhaging warmth through single pane, glass, and uninsulated walls. The opportunity cost of getting this wrong is massive. Every winter you operate a greenhouse with poor passive solar design is a winter where you're paying for heat that nature would provide absolutely free if you just oriented the thing correctly. Every season you run without thermal mass is a season where daytime solar gain vanishes the moment the sun sets instead of radiating warmth through the night. And every month you rely on electric heat as your primary system instead of your emergency backup is money you're unnecessarily handing over to the utility company when that cash could be buying seeds, soil amendments, or literally anything else. Before you spend a single dollar on heating equipment, you need to get your passive solar design right. Now, I know this sounds boring. I know you'd rather hear about which brand of heater to buy or what temperature to set your thermostat to. But here's why this matters more than you think. Passive solar design isn't about being environmentally friendly or following some green building trend. It's about capturing 4 to 6 hours of free BTUs every single day that the sun is shining. A British thermal unit is just a measurement of heat energy. 1 BTU raises 1 pound of water by 1 degree Fahrenheit. Your greenhouse needs thousands of these every day to stay warm, and the sun is offering to deliver them absolutely free if you'll just position your structure to receive them. In the northern hemisphere, south-facing orientation captures maximum winter sun when the sun's arc is low in the sky. This isn't complicated physics. The sun rises in the southeast, tracks across the southern sky, and sets in the southwest during winter months. A greenhouse with its long axis running east-west and its glazing facing south intercepts the most possible sunlight during the shortest, coldest days of the year when you need heat the most. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Every 10 degrees you deviate from true south costs you approximately 15% of potential solar gain during winter months. A greenhouse facing southeast or southwest instead of due south still captures about 80 to 85% of optimal heat. That's acceptable. A greenhouse facing east or west captures maybe 50% of what's available. A greenhouse facing north is essentially a very expensive refrigerator that you're paying to heat artificially. Your grandparents built greenhouses with 60 to 70% of their total wall area as south-facing glazing by default. Not because they'd read studies or run computer simulations, but because they understood that glass facing the winter sun is how you get free heat. Glass facing any other direction is just a pathway for heat to escape. The question everyone asks is, what if my yard doesn't allow for south-facing orientation? Maybe you've got trees or your property line or an existing building that forces you into a compromised position. Here's the answer: southeast or southwest. Orientation still gives you 80% of optimal performance. That's absolutely workable. Even east-west can function if you compensate with extra thermal mass and insulation. The only truly disastrous orientation is north-facing, which you should avoid unless you're planning to grow mushrooms or just enjoy paying utility bills. But here's something interesting that most people don't realize. Capturing solar gain is only half the equation. If you don't store that heat, you're back to square one the moment the sun sets. Once you've got your orientation locked in, the next step is absolutely critical. You need thermal mass to store all that free daytime heat and release it slowly through the night. Without thermal mass, your greenhouse might hit 75 or 80 degrees on a sunny winter afternoon, then plummet to 35 degrees by midnight. That temperature swing stresses plants and defeats the entire purpose of having a greenhouse in the first place. Thermal mass is just materials that absorb heat slowly during the day and release it slowly at night. Water is the king of thermal mass for greenhouses because it stores an enormous amount of heat relative to its cost and availability. 1 gallon of water stores approximately 8,000 BTUs for every 20-degree Fahrenheit temperature swing. That means if your water heats up from 50 degrees during the night to 70 degrees during the day, each gallon stores 8,000 BTUs that it will radiate back into the greenhouse as it cools down after sunset. Let me put this in perspective. If you set up 10 standard 55-gallon drums painted black along the north wall of your greenhouse, that's 550 gallons of water. If that water heats up by 20 degrees during a sunny day, you've stored approximately 440,000 BTUs. To put that in context, that's equivalent to running a 1,500-watt electric heater continuously for 8 to 10 hours. Except you didn't pay a single penny for that heat. The sun delivered it for free, and the water barrels just held onto it until you needed it. Your grandparents understood this instinctively. They'd line the north wall of their greenhouses with rain barrels painted black or dark green. They weren't doing it because some expert told them to. They did it because they noticed that greenhouses with water barrels stayed warmer at night than greenhouses without them. The strategy is dead simple. Let your thermal mass soak up all that passive solar gain during the day when you don't need extra heat. Then let it radiate that stored energy back into the space at night when temperatures drop. This is guaranteed thermal storage with zero operating cost. You're not paying for electricity, you're not burning fuel, you're just using basic physics to shift free heat from when you don't need it to when you do. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that usually surprises people the most. You can actually generate heat inside your greenhouse using nothing but organic materials and basic biology. Hot composting generates internal temperatures between 130 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not a typo. A properly managed compost pile gets hot enough that you can't hold your hand in the center for more than a few seconds. This happens because microorganisms breaking down organic matter release heat as a byproduct of their metabolism. It's essentially controlled biological combustion without flames. Here's what makes this so compelling for greenhouse heating. A 4 by 4 by 4 foot compost bin can release between 10,000 and 15,000 BTUs daily for weeks at a time. That's continuous background heat even on cloudy days when your passive solar gain drops to almost nothing. This isn't passive storage like thermal mass. This is active heat generation from materials you were probably going to throw away anyway. Your grandparents built compost bins directly into the north side of their greenhouses, not primarily for the fertilizer, though that was certainly a valuable bonus. They did it for the reliable warmth. A hot compost pile in winter was like having a small furnace that ran on kitchen scraps, fallen leaves, animal manure, and straw. The fuel was free, the heat was continuous, and the end product was incredible soil amendment for spring planting. The materials are absurdly simple. Kitchen scraps provide nitrogen, dry leaves and straw provide carbon. A bit of manure from chickens, rabbits, or horses accelerates the process. Layer these materials in roughly equal volumes. Keep the pile moist like a wrung out sponge and turn it every few days to introduce oxygen. Within 48 hours, the center of that pile will be hot enough to steam on a cold morning. A properly managed hot compost bin stays between 130 and 150 degrees for 4 to 6 weeks before needing to be refreshed with new materials. During that time, it's pumping heat into your greenhouse 24 hours a day, regardless of whether the sun is shining. On cloudy weeks, when your passive solar gain is minimal and your thermal mass is running down, that compost bin keeps delivering warmth. But we're not done yet. Once you've got heat capture, storage, and generation working, there's one more layer that most people completely ignore. And this is where things get really powerful. Once you've maximized heat gain through passive solar, thermal mass, and biological generation, you need to shift your focus to heat retention. Single pane glass loses approximately 70% of stored heat overnight through radiation and conduction. All that beautiful solar gain you captured, all that thermal mass you charged up, all that compost heat you generated, most of it disappears through your glazing once the sun goes down unless you do something about it. Thermal curtains are the simplest solution, and even homemade quilted fabric curtains reduce overnight heat loss by 40 to 50%. Your grandparents hung old wool blankets or quilted fabric on simple pulley systems that they draw closed at sunset and open again at sunrise. Nothing fancy, just a layer of insulating material between the cold glass and the warm interior air. Modern versions use reflective bubble wrap attached to lightweight frames that you can lean against the glazing at night. You can insulate an entire small greenhouse for about $30 in materials. The north wall is your biggest thermal liability because it receives almost no direct sunlight but loses heat just like any other wall. Adding 2-inch rigid foam insulation to your north wall cuts heat loss through that surface by approximately 60%. That's a massive improvement for a material that costs about $25 for a 4 by 8 foot sheet. Perimeter insulation matters more than most people realize. Heat doesn't just escape through your walls and roof, it also bleeds out through the ground around the edges of your greenhouse. Installing 2 feet of rigid foam board vertically into the soil around your greenhouse perimeter stops that ground heat loss. This is especially effective if you've got a concrete slab or stone floor inside because it keeps your thermal mass from dumping its stored heat into the cold earth. Here's what makes this approach so powerful. These insulation techniques work together like a Swiss Army knife of thermal defense. Thermal curtains stop radiation losses through glass at night. North wall insulation stops conduction losses through your coldest surface. Perimeter insulation stops ground losses. Combined, they can reduce your heating needs by 70 to 80% before you ever consider any mechanical heating system. At this point, you're working with nature instead of fighting against it. You've essentially built a greenhouse that heats itself through natural systems. And here's something that might surprise you. Most people never make it this far. These 4 strategies combined, passive solar orientation, thermal mass storage, biological heat generation, and comprehensive insulation, can maintain a minimum temperature of 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit inside your greenhouse, even when it's 0 to 10 degrees outside. That's full frost protection for most cold-hardy crops without burning a single kilowatt of electricity. The total cost to implement all of these strategies, if you're buying everything new, is approximately $200 to $400. Maybe you spend $50 on some used rain barrels, another $80 on rigid foam insulation, $30 on bubble wrap for thermal curtains. The compost materials are free if you've got kitchen scraps and yard waste. Even if you buy everything at retail prices, you're looking at less than $400 for a complete passive heating system. Compare that to spending $800 to $200 every single winter forever on electricity to run heaters in a poorly designed greenhouse. Your investment pays for itself in the first season. After that, every winter is essentially free heating while your neighbors are feeding the utility company month after month. If you've actually worked through all 4 of these natural heating approaches, you're already in the top 5% of greenhouse operators in terms of thermal efficiency and operating cost. Your greenhouse operates on solar energy, stored thermal mass, biological decomposition, and smart insulation, while your neighbors are writing checks to the power company every month for the same result you're getting for free. Only now, after you've maximized every natural heating system available, does it make sense to talk about backup mechanical heat. And there's a specific way to approach this final step that most people get completely backwards. Mechanical heat should be your insurance policy for extreme events, not your primary heating system. It's there for those nights when temperatures plunge below 10 degrees Fahrenheit for extended periods, or for week-long stretches of cloudy weather when your passive solar gain drops to almost nothing and your thermal mass starts running down. Here's the thing. After you've implemented all those natural systems, you don't need a 1,500 watt space heater. A small 400 to 600 watt ceramic heater is sufficient because you're not trying to heat the entire greenhouse from scratch. You're just providing a bit of supplemental warmth to prevent the temperature from dropping below freezing on the coldest nights. That heater might cost $30 to $50 to purchase and run, maybe 20 to 40 hours total over an entire winter season as emergency backup. Compare that to people who skipped all the natural steps and went straight to mechanical heat. They're running a 1,500 watt heater for 4 to 6 hours every single night all winter long. That's the difference between spending $5 to $10 per winter on electricity and spending $600 to $800. Same greenhouse size, same climate, completely different approach and completely different cost. So there you have it, the proper order for greenhouse heating that your grandparents knew instinctively: passive solar orientation, thermal mass storage, biological composting, insulation, and only then mechanical backup. Follow this sequence and your greenhouse operates on nature's energy while everyone else is trying to heat the outdoors with expensive electricity. Your plants don't just survive, they thrive in a stable thermal environment. Your operating costs approach zero, and your winter power bill stays reasonable while your neighbors are wondering why growing tomatoes in January costs more than buying them at the grocery store. Your future self will thank you for doing the boring foundation work first.